Welcome to Lighten Up, the Art of Living Clutter-Free, the podcast where we tackle the literal and figurative clutter standing between you and your healthiest and happiest life. I'm Melanie, your host, coach, and guide on this journey to help you design a life that you love. Whether it's clearing out your kitchen cabinets, untangling your digital files, or letting go of the mental blocks that hold you back, we're here to make space for what truly matters. Let's lighten up together, starting now. And hello and welcome back to Lighten Up, the Art of Living Clutter-Free. I'm Melanie, your host and your coach on all things clutter. Today, I have a special guest, and I'm just going to go ahead and dive right in. I want to make sure we have enough time to talk about all the things we want to talk about. So I have with me today Lia De Feo. She's a writer, advocate, and corporate innovator whose work spans multiple industries with over 25 years of experience at renowned companies like Food Network, Martha Stewart, Getty Images. Lia has consistently pushed boundaries and championed innovation. A passionate advocate for women's reproductive rights, Lia has spoken at the New York State Assembly in support of legalizing surrogacy and works with Resolve.org to advance reproductive justice. As a storyteller, she's won the Moth Story Slam. Oh my God. Oh, that's amazing. And been featured on award-winning podcasts. Hopefully this one will be award-winning someday. Her writing has appeared in the Washington Post, the New York Times, CNN.com, Refinery 29, and more. She writes a weekly Substack, Fly Bravely, residing in Manhattan with her husband Michael, daughter Carolina, and their dog Basil. How appropriate. Balances her work with family life and advocacy efforts. Oh my goodness, Lia, it is so exciting to have you here today.
Well, I'm honored to be here. Thank you so much for having me.
Everyone should know I met Lia at an Uplifters event. Let's give some credit to Aransas and her amazing podcast and her amazing gatherings. And the second that I heard Lia share her experience in front of the group, I knew I wanted to have her on the podcast because the day before I told my daughter, I want to have a guest on the show that can talk about the mental clutter associated with fertility and infertility. I said the same thing to my best friend on the train on the way to the Uplifters event. And then there you were.
Meant to be.
I manifested you.
I love it. Ranzis is the ultimate connector.
She really is. Okay, so I wanted you here to talk about all things mental clutter associated with fertility, infertility, and motherhood. So maybe you'd be willing to give us your story to Carolina finally being here.
Yes, it's a long one, so I'll make it concise so we can get into other topics. My husband and I met later in life. I have a stepdaughter. She was 8 at the time, and she is very close to her, very much a part of my life. But my husband and I always wanted to have a child of our own, and I really didn't expect it to be hard. I just didn't really think about it, even though I was a bit older. And we tried for so long and were not able to conceive. And we finally started fertility treatments, and I was pregnant on my 3rd IUI, which is an intrauterine insemination. I was working as an executive during that time. It was incredibly challenging to navigate fertility treatments and work. And my pregnancy was beautiful. I loved it. It was amazing. And I feel so grateful that I was able to carry a child. But my son was stillborn, and he arrived unexpectedly, so stillborn. And it was completely heartbreaking. And also just, I didn't think I knew anyone else who had a stillborn. It turns out I did. But there are so many hopes and dreams connected with pregnancy. And we felt so long to get to that point. Really challenging. After that, I wasn't able to carry. My uterus was unable to carry another pregnancy. So we, long story short, did IVF at a clinic in Connecticut because it was illegal in New York at the time. We were connected through an agency in Boston with a surrogate in Kentucky. Really incredible woman, really great, but also kind of hard experience, having someone else carry your child. And our daughter was born with an incurable heart condition. and she passed away a few hours after she was born. And that just, we couldn't believe that. That was just, us lightning strikes twice. Why is this happening? And we really thought we were done because surrogacy and IVF is insanely expensive. But the
Sure.
company I was working for, unbelievably, had not just an IVF benefit, but a surrogacy benefit, which is really unheard of, especially at that time. Long story short, we were able to try again, and we were matched with a surrogate in Utah, and our daughter Carolina arrived in 2019. So it was a very, very long journey to having her. But I think today it makes me just such a grateful and appreciative mother. And she'll be 7 this summer.
So when we first talked, I was surprised to hear like how recently surrogacy had become legal in New York. I think it didn't even occur to me that it was illegal before. All I know is I was shocked that it was so late. I figured, come on, New York,
Right. New York is
catch
known
up.
as a progressive state.
Right,
Absolutely.
right.
Yeah, it was illegal to do compensated surrogacy, compassionate, where there's someone in your family or a close friend who cares for you. That was okay. But yeah, it was illegal until the law was passed in 2020. I was in Albany in February 2020 to share my story. So the law was passed in 2020 and went into effect in 2021. So it's all very recent.
Mm,
And with that, it was really important not just to legalize it, but to create there's something called the Surrogate Bill of Rights in there, which really
yeah,
protects surrogates and makes sure that the intent of the relationship is there.
to protect the surrogates. And in my head, I was like, and protect the parents?
Both. There's both, but the concern is always around, I won't say always, there's the baby case where the surrogate, decided to keep the baby. That was a big thing in New Jersey. Yeah, but and that was different because it was like she had used her eggs and it was a genetic baby.
Uh,
Right. So in gestational surrogacy, where it is the surrogate is a carrier, the concern is usually around not, parents taking advantage of a surrogate. And so the Bill of Rights ensured that the surrogates were protected and the parents as well, of course. But really the concerns that many opponents had was around the surrogates.
okay. All right. Makes sense. But let's get down to business because this is the podcast about
Yes.
clutter.
Clutter.
And there is so much mental clutter, I think, for women about getting pregnant, being pregnant, having children. And for those of us who had it, quote unquote, easy when it comes to, having a baby, that doesn't mean it was really easy. And all the mental clutter, like I had alcohol on New Year's Eve and then
Right.
found out I was pregnant a week later, so there's always something. But tell me, for you as a mom who struggled getting pregnant, and then, I mean, it's not unheard of for miscarriage or for even stillborn,
Comment.
but for the same family to go through it multiple times, that's what I mean, so heartbreaking to hear. What are the thoughts going in your head as you're struggling through all of this?
So in the beginning, the infertile process, it's what you talked about with alcohol to to a whole nother level and a whole nother degree, because being unable to get pregnant, you really do blame yourself. Like, do I weigh too much? Am I doing, too much exercise? Do I drink too much coffee? Should I be doing something differently? You really just blame yourself because you're like, what's wrong with me? But the reality is that, only a third of the time there's something wrong with the woman, a third of the time there's something wrong with the man, and a third of the time
Mhm.
they just don't know what the problem is. And ours was one of those, they just don't know. And I think that causes, a lot of emotional clutter because the uncertainty is really hard. And I'm somebody in my life that has always been very determined and very driven. And so if I really put my mind to something and work really hard at it, I can achieve it. And that wasn't happening with pregnancy. So there's this self blame that you do. And then there's going through infertility. And I don't know how much people realize just that there's a lot of appointments and they're very timely and you have to be there often and on time. And usually they're early in the morning. And I didn't tell work what I was going through.
Mm.
And that's a very big burden because, let's say you had a 9 o'clock meeting. This happened to me a lot. And the clinic opens at 7. I would be outside at 6:30 in the morning because I wanted to be the first one online because I had to get to that meeting because I wasn't telling anyone why I might
Mm.
be late every day this week, right? So I think there's a lot of stress, and stress is like the complete opposite of what you need when you're going through infertility. But there's a lot of worry. And then once you're pregnant, I had this, I didn't tell work at first. And oh, we're at a work dinner. Are they going to notice I'm not drinking? I think my belly is looking really fat. Like, is anyone noticing? Right? You have all these like thoughts.
Yeah, there are lots of thoughts. There are
Many.
two I just wrote down, and one is that idea that, but this is so natural. Like you should just be able to get pregnant. And I know that the statement or the concept has been overused. That thought, like, teenager, didn't have a problem. So why do you struggle when you're at that age where it is appropriate? And I don't want to say that it's inappropriate for teens. That may not, that might not be received well. But during a period of your life where you say, I now have the time, the energy, and the finances to be able to parent in a way that would be comfortable for you. But we're meant to believe that this is such a natural process, and then it's not acting naturally for you. And then what are you thinking? I'm broken.
You think you're broken. You really, really think you're broken. And the conversation is getting much better in that people are talking more and more, I think, about the struggles of infertility, how common miscarriages are. So I think in a lot of ways, there's been a lot of conversation since when I went through it, where a lot of people are opening up about their struggles. And I think that is great.
Yes.
I think that's really, really important. But yes, from a very early age, you are taught that, abstinence is the way to, not get pregnant. And, you are going to get pregnant if you have unprotected sex, right? That's like middle school 101. I think that's what's in everybody's head. So when you have that moment when you're ready to start your family, I think the obvious like thought is, well, I'll just stop using birth control and obviously we're going to get pregnant.
Okay. You had me think also how, you were not sharing at work what you were going through. And I tend to be an oversharer. And so is that something that you are normally good at, being private about things in your life, or was this new for you?
This was something I felt was incredibly important to be private about because
Mhm.
of the leadership role I had within the organization.
Sure.
I very strongly believed that as a woman in a very senior leadership role, my opportunities would be limited should my boss know that I planned to be a mother. I worked really long hours, I was traveling all the time, and I felt that some of the projects I was really excited to start working on might not come my way. And those projects did come my way. And because of all my losses, I did get to actually, do them and see them through. But I think that women in the workplace, really, there is a significant bias against motherhood. And sharing that you're pregnant is something that I hope we get better at. But I think in our culture and in the United States, it's just not easy to do if you are somebody that's on, sees yourself on a certain career path.
Well, I mean, there are already so many ways they're proving to us that women in the workplace are not equal. Pay equity being at the top of the list, but for sure, the limitations in advancement and just like the look on someone's face when you tell them that you're pregnant. I was blessed in my entire career, and I've had a lot of bosses. I've only reported to three companies. And in those three companies, I reported to a woman every single
Yeah.
time. I have been blessed to have been led by mostly great women for 30 years before I went out on my own. But there were some of them that you could tell, like, oh, great, what am I going to do when she's gone? As opposed to like keeping it to themselves, which may have been more appropriate.
Yes.
But how many women are mothers and are still amazing at their job and better than most men would be?
Yes, that's a lot.
there are a lot of people out there who have struggled with getting pregnant, and there are a lot of people out there that have gotten pregnant and miscarried, and not miscarried once or twice, have miscarried multiple times. So when you're talking to someone, I assume that you've talked to people for whom they just had the first time of something like this happening. How do you engage in a conversation with them to help them feel better, I guess?
So much of what they're feeling it for the first time, and it feels very overwhelming and scary. And a lot of those self-blame and doubt, and will I ever be a mother? And the things you do when that pregnancy test is positive, like you calculate the due date and you think, oh, my baby's going to come in the summer. It's really making them understand that it is a big deal, because I think what so many people are told is if they have a problem conceiving or they have a miscarriage, oh, it's so common. If you got pregnant, you'll get pregnant again, or you'll just do IVF. And I think those things are really not helpful, but validating how they feel
What I
is.
hear is that comes from great intention.
Mhm,
It comes from
absolutely.
great intention. It's just that some of us have not been given the verbiage.
Yes. And it's validating how they feel. Like you are feeling broken. That's totally normal, totally expected. And the
Right.
hope that you have has been shattered. Like, and, it's what's really hard is when, people experience it over and over and over again. And there are people who never have that baby, they never become mothers, right? And I think that's incredibly challenging, because I know when we were in a situation where we thought we couldn't try again, we really were thinking like, okay, what does life look like, right? On the other side of this, like, how can we make a fulfilling life? But when you dream your whole dream about being a mom, and when that like is part of what you believe your identity is, not
Mhm.
getting to that point is very heartbreaking. And I think I'm not that person, right? So I can't say what I would do or give people real advice from my own perspective. But a lot of it has to do with finding the things that are fulfilling for you, right? And finding a life that is meaningful in a different way. I know there's many people. There's a woman named Risa Levine. She does so much advocacy work with Resolve, and she is somebody who always wanted to be a mother. And her and her husband at the time ran out of money and never were able to have kids. And I think someone like that, it's incredible to me how brave she is to advocate and help others when her situation remained unresolved.
Right. Right. To make, that makes me think of the people that I know in my life that have chosen to not have children for whatever reason.
Yes.
I've got a daughter who has made it ultimately clear she's not bringing another baby on this planet, but she wants to be an aunt, which means I got to rely on the other kid, which limits. But anyway, it makes me realize how many people I know that I am afraid to ask what their journey to being a couple without children, because isn't that isn't that what's is expected? You get married and then you have kids, and then they get married and you have grandkids, and then as opposed to, well, there really are a lot of different paths. And I get that this is a world right now where maybe we don't want to be bringing children into it for 1,000 different reasons, but it makes me realize that I don't have the language to ask someone. And then the question is, and is it even important? Just because you're curious, so is it important to ask, really?
Yeah, and I think that a lot of these questions, in my opinion, are probably just better left unsaid. If they want to
Yeah.
share that, through the context of a relationship,
Right.
I think they would. And there are actually plenty of people that decide not to have children, and I actually think that's a really wonderful decision, because being a parent is so hard that I
Hmm.
cannot imagine being a parent because you were feeling societal pressure, right? Or whatever the reason was that you became a parent, but it wasn't something that you were really, hoping for. It changes your life in so many beautiful ways, but in so many challenging ways. So I think that, people who decide not to actively, I really respect that, because I think that is the right thing to do for them and for the child that they're not
Right.
having. I think that's the right thing.
Right. Yes. Yes. I think it. falls into that category of, like, I have to know. No, you don't. You don't have to know everything. You don't have to know
And
everything.
quite painful for people who might be perceived as older, to be asked, oh, well, you and your husband, you've been married for years. When are you having kids? Right. And it might be that they don't want kids, but it might be like many people I speak to, they are having a hard time and they are
Right.
trying. And
Right.
bringing it up just makes it that much more painful. And again, mental clutter of like, oh gosh, the holidays are coming up. What do I say? They're going to ask me again. How do I respond? Right?
Yeah. Yeah. And often if it's a holiday, you're not talking about one family member being in the room. You're talking about having a gathering, and now it's very, very public. There is a lot that doesn't need to be shared just because people are curious.
Yes.
So one of the other things that we talked about in terms of mental clutter is the clutter associated with being a parent and
Hmm.
all the things that we're supposed to do and we're supposed to act like and supposed to provide. And you and I were talking before the episode about the difference between being a parent at 26 for me and you becoming a parent at 41. I loved what you had to say about well, I was talking about how I think you're a much more patient parent than I was at that, as when my kids were the same age as Carolina. So can you talk a little bit about being patient?
Yeah, I think for me, don't get me wrong, I lose my patience. We all do, right? But I think that I have so much gratitude for having her. Our road was so long and so challenging. And I find myself being a much more patient mom than I think I would have been if my son wasn't stillborn and I had my son, I don't know if I would have appreciated, you know what I mean, Carolina, like I'm appreciating her today. And so it's been something I have to remind myself when I'm losing my patience, right? It's that I'm actually just so grateful she's here. I'm so lucky I get to lose my patience, right? How many women
Absolutely.
would be thrilled? Because I do remember when I was going through everything, I would like go out to dinner with my girlfriends and they would be like complaining about whatever, like their husband isn't, I don't know, giving the kids the bath or they're exhausted by this. And I was like, in my head, I'm like, you all are so darn lucky. Like, these are your problems with your kids that are alive and you're raising them, right? Like, so I try to just remind myself of how lucky I am and it helps.
You know what it is? I actually just started outlining an episode that I'm going to do with just me. And I currently am titling it, Was It Something I Said? And it's all about the times that we've opened our mouths and inserted our foot. And so the conversation is about, like, so why did I do that? And now how do I get out of this? So like the being able to apologize, and that sometimes the other person didn't even notice that you said that thing that you just wish you hadn't said. And very often they did hear that thing and they do need to hear that apology from you. Did you have anybody in your life that came back later?
That is such a good question. I had somebody in my life who was quite young when I was going through everything, not yet married, subsequently got married, tried to have kids for a very long time. And when this person was going through infertility, they came back to me and said, I am sorry I wasn't there for you, because I didn't realize how much you were going through. And what I said was true, which was, well, I was going through a lot, but I wasn't actually all that open about it either. So, thank you for saying that. But at the same time, it wasn't like I was reaching out and looking for help, right? So I think part of the struggle of infertility is that it is something we deal with. It's a very personal thing. And sometimes people want to deal with it kind of on their own. And I don't think I was necessarily like intentionally not bringing people into it. I think it just felt like such a roller coaster for my husband and I, especially as we were going through our surrogacy journeys, that I felt like it was almost such a burden to like keep people along on the roller coaster ride, that there was just very few people that knew what was happening. And that was really it. It became like this burden of like, oh, I didn't update this person. Oh, I forgot to tell them we had our 20-week scan, right? Things like that.
Would you have done it in reflection? Would you have done it any differently?
Think so. I think that one of the things my husband and I did starting after we lost our son, that I tell everybody who is going through this to do, is we found support. And we found support through, for us, it was a grief counselor that specialized in loss, in infant loss. And women and men process these things so differently. I felt so connected to our son. I carried him, I felt him in my body. I would speak to him, I would tell him stories. I felt so connected to him. My husband didn't feel that same level of connection, right? He saw me pregnant. He painted the nursery, right? He was like ready and he was right there, but he didn't have that same connection. And so the
Mm,
loss hit us both incredibly differently. And
right.
having somebody that was a professional to guide us through the grief really made a huge difference for our relationship. And so now there are so many more resources available. I mentioned Resolve a few times in this podcast, but they have really, really great support groups that are free and available. And, another woman who I just admire so much, her name is Christina. She started something called the Revive Project, which helps women advocate for themselves in their doctor's office. And it provides like questions that you can ask your doctor and ways to approach conversations around infertility. So, that's really interesting as well.
Sure. And I would imagine that that's also something that women need at the doctor's office, no matter what the doctor is and no matter what the diagnosis is,
Oh,
that we all
definitely.
need to learn how to be better advocates. But that's so emotional that if I didn't have a list of
Right.
questions, I would not be asking the right question. 100%, I would not be asking the right questions.
Yeah, I think we also feel rushed as women, like we have these questions and then it's like the doctor's rushed in and maybe, you have, they're like moving on to the next patient. And this is
Right.
just the way our medicine is today, right? Doctors have a very limited time with each patient. You feel rushed. You're like, oh, I had 5 questions. I only asked 2. Those were my 2 important ones. But, it's really important that we're heard in this
Yeah,
process.
absolutely. So we were talking a little bit about opening mouths and inserting feet. And I do want to mention, and I hope he's listening. I have a friend who their son was born stillborn, and it was a huge grieving process for the both of them, which I am sure, has not ended. He has done an amazing job finding himself the right group of people, a dad's group specifically for what he went through, which I think is amazing. But I was with him, and his daughter at the time was, I think, like 3, 4 months old. And I saw him and I asked him what it felt like to be a dad. And I got quickly corrected, I
Mhm.
was a dad. And it had not occurred to me. I think people talk about miscarriage kind of a lot. People don't talk about what you and he and his wife went through with as much frequency. And maybe you can talk about being understood or
Yes.
getting people to understand the
It's
baby is not born alive. It's still my baby. It's still my child. I'm still a parent.
Absolutely. It was really hard. And even, the closest people in my family weren't wishing me a happy Mother's Day, right? And that was hurtful. And I had conversations with them about it. And I said, actually, I am a mom. And people ask, oh, how many children do you have? And sometimes it depends on the situation. Oh, I have, 2. I have a stepdaughter and a daughter. Or, oh, I have 4. I have a stepdaughter, a daughter, and, 2 children that passed. So, I think it's situational how I answer sometimes. And maybe it should be, maybe it shouldn't be. Recognizing if somebody experiences a loss, I think one of the best things you can do for them is to write down the date that baby arrived in this world, when they died, and reach out to them and say, I'm thinking about
Mm,
you today. There are people who do that for me every year. And I can't even tell you how much it means to feel that my child's life is honored, not just by me, but by others, that they're remembered. And for me, a lot of the advocacy work I do in honor of my children, because in some ways, I certainly wouldn't be doing the work that I'm doing if not for them. So, I think it's important. And our daughter, Evelina, who arrived via surrogate, I always tell our surrogate, you made me a mother to a baby that I could hold and talk to and experience. Yes, our daughter died a few hours after birth, but, I was a mom to this beautiful living baby, even if just for a short time. We, tried to make her feel as loved as possible in that time. So yeah, it's really hard. It's really, really hard. And, we have a bench in honor of our babies, and we go to the bench frequently, but certainly on the days that they arrived and passed, as
Where's
well
the
as
bench?
it's in the West Village. It's in this beautiful garden. It's called St. Luke's in the Fields. It is on Hudson Street, just south of Christopher on Morton, I believe. And it's like a secret garden. It's a walled in brick garden that you kind of wouldn't know is there from the street. And when you walk in, it is so peaceful. It has beautiful plantings, lots of benches, and it's a really beautiful place to kind of sit and talk. I will sit on the bench and write and actually like read what I've written out loud. And the act of kind of speaking out loud to someone that you're grieving is something that has been proven to really help people process loss.
Sure. So is it an open garden? Like I can go the next time I'm in the
Anyone
West
can go.
Village? I
Yeah.
will go. Okay. So the daughter that passed is Avelina,
Evelina, yes.
and your son's name?
Christopher.
All right. Right off of Christopher Street.
Yes. Yes. Right? And
I like
Avelina
that.
is she was named in honor of my father-in-law who was born in Avellino, Italy, and Avellino means little bird. So a bird that was here for a short time and flew away.
So Carolina, what does she know?
Everything. And, maybe that's a burden for a kid, but she has come with us to the bench since the beginning. She helps us scatter rose petals. She listens to what I write. She knows that I very much believe that Christopher and Avelina are with us and, watching over us. That's something I believe. And she asks me, just the other night, she asked me about how Christopher was born and if she could see my scar, my C-section scar.
I would imagine what I know about you, you showed her without fail.
Yes, she saw it. But it's, she's deeply curious about it. And we're very open, my husband and I, with, my stepdaughter, my daughter. We've always just been very open with them. And we believe it's the right thing to do for her to grow up knowing that she had two siblings that aren't here today.
And your stepdaughter, what was her experience during this process? Because she was a very different age.
It was so, so hard. She was so happy to be having a sibling, thrilled to be having a sibling, something she wanted for a very long time. Her parents got divorced when she was very young, and having a sibling was just so exciting to her that when Christopher was stillborn, it was really scary because she saw, what had happened to me. I almost died. My uterus ruptured, and I'm very lucky to be alive. But she saw that. And then, we told her we were expecting through a surrogate, and she was very young when all of this was happening. Right. And so I think it's had a huge impact on her. It's had a real impact on how she thinks about reproductive rights, and, being a woman and being half sister to her sister is something that she is so good at. And so I think, like, me being an appreciative mom, she's a very appreciative half sister because of how hard it was. But we didn't tell her that Carolina was coming until like really close to the end. She had been through it twice, and it was a lot for a kid to navigate.
I'm sure. Her age difference. My husband is the product of his father's first marriage. May his father rest in peace. And his brother and sister are a product of his father's third marriage. So he is 14 years older than his sister and 16 years older than his brother. And when my husband and I started dating, the kids were 7 and 5. So, I had always wished I had a brother or sister. Actually, what I wanted was an older sister when I was really young, and I guess I didn't understand how this stuff worked. But I would not have been a good little sister. I think I would have been a great big sister. And then I got to be one.
That's
I got
great.
to be one because I have known his brother and sister who are now in their 40s, which is crazy, since they were kids. And his sister like attached to me very quickly, and I was very attached to her very quickly. So what I wanted to say about it was like, I think my husband was more in like an uncle role when they were first around. And once they hit college and then a little bit out, now we're all like this, even though they live 2,800 miles away in Los Angeles. We're all like this, and it's as if there's not that much of an age difference.
I've heard that.
I liked getting to see that, so I can only imagine what it would be like for your daughters to have that relationship as they get older. It's very interesting when things then seem to have leveled out a little bit. So what is something that you would want for someone to know who's going through all of this? What's the piece of advice that you would give someone? Because a lot of us don't want advice. Someone came to you and said, what do I say to my wife? What do I say to my sister? What should I be saying to myself? What kind of things would you offer?
I think you have to yourself, try not to be hard on yourself. It's easier said than done, but try your hardest not to beat yourself up and not to, to be good to yourself. I actually say that to my daughter all the time when I drop her off at school. I say, be good to yourself today. And I
Mhm.
think we all need to be better to ourselves. We all have this internal voice that can be our own worst critic. And, I think the best thing you can do is turn that off and really try to be good to yourself. I think everybody going through this wants to be interacted with differently. So it's hard to say what to do, what to say, but just letting people know that you are there in whatever way they need, that goes a long way. But I think specifically if somebody has, lost a child, lost a pregnancy, if you say, what can I do for you? They don't know. They actually just don't know. But I had a friend who showed up at my doorstep with groceries. It was really thoughtful. It was just really kind, right? I had a group of friends that like organized a seamless gift card, right? Like it's just someone dropped off flowers. It's just knowing that these people are thinking about you. It's, visiting if you're welcome, and respecting their boundaries. There were times where I said, please don't come by. No offense. I just don't want to see anyone right now, right? So I don't want to say asking for what they want because they'll often say nothing, but send them a card, send them a text. I'm thinking about you. I'm here for you. I'd love to get a coffee if you're up for it, right? Like something along those lines so they know. Go for a walk, just something to without saying without, maybe even addressing what's going on. Like, are you up for a walk today? Are you up for coffee today? Checking in with them.
Sure. I mean, I think so many of those are the things that we need to be saying or doing, when a friend has a cancer diagnosis.
Oh,
Like any of those other like, tough experiences in life, is to let them know that you're thinking of them, but not wanting to intrude,
yes.
and letting them decide, what is best for them. But we've also been taught to say, "Oh, I don't need anything. I'll be fine. I'll take
Right.
care of it myself. I don't want to look like I'm needy." So there's like a real fine line in there, right?
There is. And I mean, something I've done is I've sent people books. Like sometimes just reading about others who have had a similar experience can be incredibly healing. So sometimes I will send someone a book that's relevant to kind of what they experienced and say, this book helped me. And, it might help you too, right? Processing our thoughts through writing, like sending someone a journal and a pen, like it really depends on who the person is. But you can do something like that that shows them that you're thinking and you're caring without being intrusive in a way.
Right. Absolutely. Absolutely. Did we miss anything? Like, is there any mental clutter associated with fertility and fertility parenthood that you think we might have missed?
Think there's also just honestly a lot of clutter around the birthing process. Like these concerns around, what kind of a delivery you want and how you want things to happen. I know I made my husband sign up for like a 3 hour like birthing class, right? And the nurse gave the class and I had this whole birthing plan and this is what we're going to do. And like, do I want the epidural? Do I want the this? Like, am I going to like, how do we save the colostrum? Am I going to breastfeed? All these things. And at the end of the day, my birth looked absolutely nothing, right? It was tragic. It looked nothing like it was.
Sure.
So I think that there's this mental clutter people have around like the way they're going to give birth and the right way to do it. And at the end of the day, these are situations just like infertility, birth, we can't control. And so as
Or
much as
predict.
or pretty control the situation or predict or say this is how it's going to go, we can't always do that. And so you're putting all this like mental pressure and clutter on yourself for something that the outcome may look really different than how you envision it. And then what? And then you feel bad because you had to have a C-section, but you wanted a normal delivery, or you know what I mean? Normal, I should say, natural, excuse me. But I think that that's another aspect that, do I breastfeed? Do I not? Is there guilt around that? Right. And however you do it is okay. It's your way. And I think we don't accept that as much as we should.
100%. I'm so happy you mentioned that because my first daughter, I'm not having drugs. This is going to be natural. Women have been doing this for millions of years, like all the things we've heard. And then I was begging for an epidural. My water broke weeks before she was supposed to be born. I had an infection that we didn't know about, which often leads to, so she wasn't ready and she wasn't moving. And I was like, so Pitocin makes it go like that. You go from 0 to 60, no lying. It's more like 0 to 120. And I begged for an epidural and I got one. And it was like the greatest thing on the planet. But the other thing that happened in her delivery was I had heard of forceps before. And I was pushing for 2 hours and, or however long it was. And I heard him tell my husband, this is it. We're going to try one more. And then we have to do a C-section. And he said, I'm going to use the vacuum extractor. Those were words that I had never heard before. Vacuum extractor. I kid you not, that kid came out. I was like, there's no way. He had to use the vacuum extractor, which left two little scars on the top of her head that were just hilarious. And I'm glad that we could laugh about it in the moment, but I was led to believe that things were going to go a certain way. And then it didn't. With my second daughter, I knew I wanted an epidural. I was like, I'm not going through that again. And then we got to the hospital and it was too late. Great. Things happen the way they happen. But you also made me think about how many people can't nurse
Mhm.
or don't produce milk or whatever. And they are judged by the nursing moms of the world without understanding why the baby is not being breastfed. So happy you brought that up because I think more people need to be conscious of that.
I agree.
You're right. There's so much else. I so appreciate you being here today. I know that this is something that you talk about often, and I'm so appreciative to how open you are about this because I do think that this is something that there are going to be people who are listening. Thank God, me too. I feel heard. And then other people who just need to hear it so that, they can truly understand. You'll never understand unless you go through it. I can't, but to at least have an understanding from someone else telling the story and maybe knowing how to do things differently in the future for the people in their lives.
Yes. Thank you for giving me the opportunity to share today and to have this conversation with you.
I love that I have a platform now. So before we finish, I ask everybody before we're done, what is your clutter? And so I don't care whether it's a physical, if it's a mental, if it's a calendar, whatever it is. When you think of how clutter affects you, what's the clutter in your life?
It's funny because we were talking in preparation for this, and you were talking about the kitchen counter and how emotional clutter is sometimes like actually manifesting as, right, the physical clutter. And I realized that we have this toaster oven in our kitchen, and I don't use it sometimes because on top of it, we keep all of our bread. And if I turn on the toaster, then the bread gets all heated up and then it gets like moist. And that physical clutter on top of that toaster, I had to redo that whole counter,
So
Melanie.
what'd you
So
do? Where's the
thank you.
bread now?
The coffee little K cups got moved to a different container and the bread got moved. It just got reorganized. So thank you for mentioning that because the clutter on my toaster oven has been completely changed. Thank you.
I love that. It's just the little things that
Yeah,
really
because
make a big
toasting a
difference.
waffle in the morning was making breakfast stressful and it didn't have to be.
And you have a 7-year-old daughter. So waffles, I know, are a big part of the morning.
Very important part of the morning.
Oh my goodness, this was a pleasure. And your information is going to be in the show notes. Should people, want to follow you on Substack, which I really highly recommend. You are an amazing writer. And in
So
addition
kind
to
of you.
being an amazing talker, if you will. And so I hope that people will follow you and your journey and share your journey with other people in their lives that they know need to hear this. So
Wonderful. Thank you again, Melanie.
Thank you for tuning into this episode of Lighten Up, the Art of Living Clutter-Free. I hope you found a spark of inspiration to help declutter not just your space, but your mind and life as well. If you enjoyed this episode, please be sure to subscribe, leave a review, and share it with someone who could use a little lightness in their life. Remember, it's not about being perfect, it's about progress. Small steps lead to big changes, and I'm here to help you every step of the way. For more tips, resources, and ways to connect, check out my website, follow me on social media, and don't forget to check out the Design Your Healthy Life Strategy program to take your transformation even further. Until next time, keep letting go of what no longer serves you and making room for what truly lights you up.